concept that you explained in the book. I think the phrase that you use is living with water. And it's the idea that, it's not that life is stable and then suddenly there's a shock. Life today, and increasingly with climate change and with conflict in the world and globalization, increasingly there's a steady series of shocks. We have to assume there will always be a flood, or that we are living with water. We're not keeping it at bay. Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
Exactly. I think in the developed world, we've seen that except maybe for the Dutch, but what most countries have tried to do is sort of pave and pipe and pump rather than living with water. And with climate change and all of the accelerating vulnerability we're seeing along so many coastlines everywhere in the world, there is a new concept of living with water and how we restore our wetlands, our natural ecosystem, our coastal buffers. We did, again, through ACERN, enormous work in India, in Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam on these kinds of coastal buffering systems, replanting mangroves. All of that is living with water. But there are other ways to live with water that take resilience frameworks. For example, in Surat, they were getting tremendous flooding due to rainfall. With them, we actually worked on an integrated early warning system about dam release. They didn't control the dam. That was controlled by another government further upstream. Okay. And so it was really just about integrating the information systems about dam release, early warning. And so in 2013, they had more rainfall than the rainfall that virtually wiped them out in 2008. But no loss of lives, no loss of livelihoods, because they had this resilience planning within. And if you think about our development spend in the last 30 years, for every $3 that we spend on development, $1 has been eradicated in some crisis, whether it's a natural or a man-made disaster. So if we make our development investments with more of a resilience-building framework, we will tend to mitigate that. That was $3.8 trillion in the last 30 years lost, development dollars lost to the next crisis or disaster.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. What would be your message? I know, the Rockefeller Foundation is large compared to many foundations, but it's tiny compared to the global development community, $200 billion. And so your strategy has always been to be a catalyst, to kind of move the whole industry. On this issue of resilience, where do you want to move the industry? Where do you want to see, USAID or DFID or other foundations, NGOs? How would you like to see them change the way they work?
Well, as you know, we've launched a global resilience partnership initially with Rockefeller and USAID, and now SIDA of Sweden, the Swedish right. Aid Agency. And the idea here is really to build resilience into development investments. And our goal is to create capacity among all entities working on the ground, to do that, to be able to invest with the resilience framework, to aid them with tools and technology that will allow more sophisticated kind of risk assessment, data integration and data analytics, and also running resilience innovation challenges so that we all have a chance to source innovation coming from the ground. So the Resilience Dividend, the title of the book, really means how do we get more bang for the buck? How do we get more out of each investment? And the stories that I tell over and over again are about investments that do two things. They do good things for the good times, so better infrastructure, better community cohesion, more job creation, and then they make us have the ability to recover more quickly and more effectively in the bad times. Why wouldn't we want to invest that way to get more benefit from our investments?
And you're not actually advocating for more money. In this time of constrained foreign aid budgets, you're saying spend what we spend, just spend it differently. Is that right?
Yes, spend it more smartly. There's a resilient and a non-resilient way to build a bridge. There's a resilient and a non-resilient way to build a dam or pave a highway or invest in a community. The other notion about resilience that should really resonate with development workers worldwide is that this is really about community engagement and community cohesion. And so resilience building requires some top-down leadership, but it is very fundamentally a bottoms-up process. We at Rockefeller always focus on the poor and the vulnerable, and so all of our resilience work has taken that lens. but we've been very struck by the community cohesion and community capacity building that emerges when government and the private sector and the development sector work on the ground with communities. And so in the Global Resilience Partnership, as you know, we're taking on some of the toughest places in the world in terms of where the most humanitarian aid has been spent, the Sahel and the Horn of Africa and the rim of Southeast and South Asia that has such a vulnerable coastline. And so this is a strong test of this hypothesis that the investment through resilience lens, through a resilience framework, really will pay dividends, both in the short term and in the long term.